I'm ready to chat when you are. Let's chitter chatter away. Chitty bang bang.
I was just gonna see how long you went.
Well, I'll chit, and I'll chat, but then you'll bang because you're feisty and ready for fighting.
And that's Chitty bang bang. Hey, welcome to the No Kidding Podcast. My name is Lervin.
And my name is Markle.
And that is
totally incorrect.
Not brother and sister. They're not related at all.
No, well, they are. Well, no, I guess they're not. You're right.
This is deep lore for the beginning of the podcast.
This just got...
Yeah, we went down a path.
Weird. Okay, so my name is Lisa. I'm the sister half of this podcast.
I said what I said.
I'm a little more level-headed one tonight. Andrew is feisty. He is ready to go down on anybody. That's not what I meant.
Hang on, rephrase. Rephrase.
He's ready to take anyone who crosses his path down. That's what I'm getting at. So yeah, he's had multiple people tell him that he's the problem and he thinks otherwise. So
hey,
that's what we've established.
Problem, it's me. I've been drinking Voodoo Ranger. That might be part of the problem.
Oh, okay.
If you know, you know.
I don't know. So you want to explain? Because I don't know. Am I not part of? I'm
high
not.
Percentage beer.
Okay. I'm not privy.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm also like addicted to. I got a knife and the Smokies. We can talk about that.
Knife?
Yeah, I got it at that like the Knock, the NOC store.
Oh yes.
And it's spring assisted, and it's the first like spring assisted knife I've had, and it's so satisfying to fidget with.
Yeah.
So just like I'm just sitting here at my desk constantly like flicking it. And
is that what that clicking noise is?
Yeah, that'll make an appearance in the
knife,
audio.
The knife has entered the chat.
Yeah. I've got a knife. Have you seen that video? The kid running around? There's a kid, it's like a video at a party, and there's this kid sprinting through the yard and he has something in his hand, and his mom goes, "What is that?" And he's like, "I've got a knife." And she's like, "No!" She goes running after him.
At least he was honest.
Yeah.
What a nice guy. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so you have a knife. Is that? I thought you had a knife. Like you were. Is that the knife that you were showing off at the mountains when we went
showing off? I was like, "Oh, do you need that cut?" Click.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is that a package that needs opening in the mountains? Got it. Do we need to cut some cheese?
Actually, well, okay. I do think I remember you bringing it out when we needed a knife, but I can't remember the circumstance. But you were the one that was prepared. So
yeah, it's like that Gus Johnson skit where he's like anybody with a knife, like the knife guy, and, and he's just like constantly like, "Does anybody need a knife?"
That's exactly who you are.
Yeah, I felt seen.
Yeah,
I was like, "Thank you for making such a great representation of this individual who I am."
Right. So I didn't realize that was a purchase you made there. So that's why it was so.
Yeah, I had two purchases at that Knock store. I always feel like those stores, I kind of roll my eyes at them because they're like, so, I don't know. Like,
expensive and.
They're expensive and just like, what's the word for it? Like.
Touristy?
Gentrified? I don't know. Yeah, like touristy kind of stuff where it's just like, oh, it's like they make it look all like hardcore, you're a camper, but it's like obviously just a like box store that has been themed like log cabin.
Yeah, it's like an outdoor store that's geared towards like the higher society, I guess. I don't know how to say that.
Well, I feel like it's like that. It's also kind of like Bass Pro sort of thing, where it's just kind of. It's like a big store, but yeah, they also kind of mark stuff up like unnecessarily, or at least that's what I felt like. But I went there and I got like pretty good prices on the. I will
say that I think what has happened is their prices this year. I agree. I think because we go every single year. And this year, I feel like their prices weren't that bad, but I think I'm comparing that to the fact that the rest of the world has hiked their prices so much because of all this inflation or whatever.
They're just a little behind.
And they haven't done that yet for whatever reason, possibly because they might need to make more sales or whatever it is. But yeah, I feel like they were a little bit more reasonable, quote unquote, but they were probably like the same as they were last year and just haven't changed with the times.
Yeah.
But yeah, like because we usually shop for like camping gear or like some kind of gear while we're there, or not specifically at the Knox store, but just in general, like looking for things or whatever.
Things and stuff.
Yeah, it's always good to stock up your camping stuff sometimes, or your adventure stuff.
Well, it's nice that it's there, even though like Gatlinburg is a pretty touristy place, but it is like the town nearby the Smoky Mountains where we went to vacation. If anybody hasn't caught up to this,
right? Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. Where we went on a trip, and we'll talk about that. But we're talking about this store specifically. It's the Knox store, but I'm not trying to like rag on it, because we do go it's like one of those traditional things that we do. We go to that store every single year. So, we like it, but it's more of like what we do is we go there and we look at all the cool stuff and we take pictures of it, and then we go and look online for a cheaper option. It's kind of usually how it goes.
It's the Nantahala Outdoor Center.
Yes.
That's why it's in OC.
Right. But this year, I actually bought a couple of things there too this year, because...
Really?
Yeah, but it wasn't like...
It wasn't not sponsored.
Yeah. But it wasn't cool stuff. It wasn't like gear or anything like that. I got just a couple souvenirs for some of gummy bear. I just got a gummy bear. I was feeling
single gummy bear.
Peckish, They don't sell candy like that. But across the street, Old Dad's does. There's like an Old Dad's general store, which is like
That's been there forever.
Yeah, it's been there forever.
They've obviously rebranded and done up like a log cabin, like everything
their
else.
sign and stuff is all new, but the store itself, it's a very small like general store. I think like a convenience store, like a gas station store, but it's like woodsy, and it's a cabin, and it's like looks country, and but all the stuff in there is very up to date. And I mean, I don't know if you've ever traveled a lot where you're like in these back country stores, and sometimes I'll look at the expiration dates and they're like a year old, and I'm thinking like, wow, what?
Like past it? Or a year, like close to the expiration date?
It's like a year past its expiration date.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. But anyways, so it's really, lively store. Lots of people go there. But they do have these barrels of just filled with like individual candies, kind of like you would find at an older store like that, where you can go in and just get like one piece of candy. And Caleb was so cute. Caleb's our nephew. And he's like, Lisa, how much do you think these candies are? And I was like, I don't know. Why don't you ask the desk or whatever? And he goes, oh, that's a good idea. I see there's an old lady working there. And I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure what that means. And he goes, oh, well, if I'm a kid and I go up there and ask her how much one piece of candy is, she'll just give it to me for free. I was like,
I like how he knows this. He's like, it's the rules.
I know. And then like, I'm thinking, oh boy, because maybe that probably happened to him when he was little, like smaller. Yeah. But anyway, he goes up to the front and he goes and he asks all innocently like, oh, how much is this piece of candy? And she's like, 25 cents. And like, he just looks at her. He looks at her for a second, and then he comes back and he goes, okay, I'm gonna need 25 cents. And I'm like, okay.
He's like, what kind of heartless woman are you?
And I'm like, I guess you aged out of that free candy range.
Yeah. I remember the day that I went to at Publix, usually that's the local grocery store. Well, usually at the bakery, they have like a little container of cookies. Mm-hmm. And they'll give it to like little kids. And I remember like when I was 12 or something, and I showed up and they're like, that's not a kid.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
no.
I can't get free cookies anymore.
Now you're really grown up. It's true. It is
But I can ride roller coasters. Dang.
Oh, the payoff. I don't know. Yeah. Which is sweeter.
Which one is it? I don't know.
I know. It is interesting. Those little coming of age moments. But yeah, so speaking of like starting fights and stuff, so Andrew stole my bike rack and hasn't returned it yet. I find that like so rude.
Stole!
I'm joking. Of course I'm joking. I don't need it at all anytime soon, so
I'll keep it. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the loan.
No,
I did appreciate it. It was
it actually worked out really good. So
yeah, it was interesting that we have such a small car. It's basically like a smart car sized car, and to have to have the like double bike rack on the back was like we like doubled the length of the car. Yeah, but it was cool to be able to get up there in the mountains with the bikes and everything.
So you traveled so far and it was fine, right? It was okay.
It did like slip a little, like get a little cockeyed just because unfortunately our two bikes won't, like you're supposed to kind of like flip the bikes around so the weight is distributed evenly, you know, but ours wouldn't fit that way. So we had to kind of not ideally place them, but it worked.
Okay. I've obviously only transported one bike at a time because I only have one bike, but so I was curious to see how two bikes would do, but good. So let's like explain why you took my bike rack, why we've been talking about, giving knife advice. We went on this, it's summer, so we went on a couple trips, and you guys went on a trip right before we went on our beach trip, right? You went somewhere. Have you talked about that on a podcast yet?
A beach trip? Well,
no. Like, before the beach.
I mean, I went to New York like in January. That was a long time ago.
Oh, that was a long time ago. You didn't.
I went to Chicago.
Okay, yeah, I knew there was something.
I think we talked about Chicago though.
Okay, so you talked about
I can't remember.
I don't remember either. But probably if it was more than a month ago. Yeah. I'm guessing. Okay, so anyways, Andrew went to Chicago. Windy City. Was it windy? I probably asked that.
Apparently that's a thing. I feel like I've mentioned this before, but that's a misnomer. Well, not a misnomer, but it was named after the like I guess people from Chicago that they were always boasting about their city, and like the old timey word for like using a lot of hot air was like if somebody was windy. Oh. They would like speak a lot about nonsense. Uh-huh. So it was called the Windy City because everybody would want to talk about their city and like boast about it all the time.
Oh, interesting.
So that's why it's called the Windy City apparently. Oh. And also I learned lots of facts. You know, apparently. Chicago is a Native American word for garlic.
Really?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not exactly. It's like Chicago or something, but the settlers like misheard it, and they're like, "Oh, so this is the land of Chicago? Cool."
Oh, because they produce a lot of garlic there?
Yeah, they were like, "There's some garlic here."
Oh, okay. I didn't know that either. Interesting. Because I was like, that'd be kind of weird. Call entire city Chicago and not actually be the word, like have anything to do with it.
Yeah,
I'm sure that happens anyway, but.
I went on a tour if you didn't know, so I'm pretty much.
Oh, well, do tell all of your knowledge.
Yeah, we went for a work event, so I got to do some like touristy stuff on their dime, so that was kind of fun.
That is always fun.
One of them was a river architecture tour, which I realized after doing that, like I know all the buildings there. Like I didn't realize they were from Chicago. I never knew they were from Chicago, but there was so many like iconic buildings that I'm like, yeah, I've seen this in like magazines and videos and like all sorts of stuff like in movies and whatever. Yeah. And I saw like, I don't know, randomly sort of recently I went down like an architecture rabbit hole on YouTube. And they would like just have examples of various like interesting designs, and there was a lot of them in Chicago. Like one of them in particular is a very interesting building because they have a limit with how close you can be to the waterway. Like there has to actually be a substantial area for people to like walk along the river. You can't build like right up against the river anymore.
Yes.
Like there are some buildings that are closer, but they were built like before that law, like a long time ago. They were like historic buildings. But a lot of the buildings that there's that stipulation, and there's one of these buildings that is basically like a Y, because like the base has to be super narrow to allow for people to walk around it, but to get around that for like the space they want in the building is the building like expands as it goes up. So like after a couple floors, it then like
gets bigger.
There's a couple floors of expansion, and then the rest of the building's like huge.
Oh,
so it's super weird looking because it's like this is not how like engineering is supposed to work.
Right,
it's like
how
really thin base and a really big top. So like
right,
this is
like
the exact opposite.
Yeah. Wow, but, interesting.
Yeah, they kind of go into like the structure of it and like how they accomplish that and like how they like kind of the way that they like put the beams and everything. It kind of like brings all of the stress down to the center of the building instead of like out to the sides. So it's cool.
Okay,
it's very interesting. They also have those. If you ever seen those buildings that look like two corn on the cobs, that's Chicago.
Corn on the cobs.
Yeah, just Google corn cob buildings and you'll see them.
They actually look like corn cobs.
Yeah, that was a tip for the audience.
Corn cob building, Chicago. Ah, yeah, okay.
They kind of remind me of those buildings from Men in Black that ended up being UFOs.
Oh.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm trying to think, but no, not really.
Oh my God, have you heard about the aliens?
Yes, I have.
Everyone's talking about the aliens.
Everyone's talking about the aliens. We know they're out there. Come on.
I mean, obviously aliens exist. Like,
obviously.
we're just going to say, obviously, like, we're not the only beings in the universe. But being here is different. Like, being among us is a whole different beast, I think.
True.
My whole theory on that has been, like, that if they're so advanced that we don't pose a threat, why would they hide? And if they're not so advanced that we could possibly pose a threat to them, could they even hide from us? Like, you know, like would they, if they're not so advanced that we couldn't find them? Like if they could just disappear in an instant and we literally can't detect them, then they would be like invincible to us. And then why would they need to hide?
Yeah.
But,
well, I wager to say that like 90% of people who think that they spot something is not really have anything to do with aliens.
Oh, for sure.
But I do think that, like, I think if they do come, it's very rare. And it's more just, like, to check us out every, like, decade or something, just to see, like, how far along we've come. I don't know. I don't know if that's actual, too, but...
That's my only thought is, like, if they were going to be here and hide and also be so advanced that, like, we don't pose a threat to them, then it must be research, right? It must be. Like, what else? We put, like, cameras in the wilderness to observe like whatever animals in their natural habitat, monkeys or whatever, and we don't want to disturb them.
Do you think there's
just see them
cameras? Do you think they drop cameras? Or like,
oh, for sure. I mean, like if they have UFOs here, if they're here, if like they announce that the government has found aliens or whatever, for sure they've like put some beacons or something to like monitor us.
True. Were you there when Dad was telling us about the UFO he saw? I was like, oh, okay. I've never heard that before. And he's like the most, well, I mean, like he's an engineer. So he's like very, like I would not have expected him to have said that story.
Yeah. My wife was also like, I did not expect to hear that from him.
Yeah.
I heard him mention that before.
Okay.
He was like, the story was very simple. He was like, I was sitting quietly with my friend Bill on the back porch. And when
he was like a teenager or like 20s or something like that.
Pretty young, yeah. And then he's like, I saw a little line go across the sky and then stop. And then immediately, like at a right angle or whatever, he was like, it went in a different direction. And then he's like, I sat there for a minute and I said, Bill, you see that? And he said, yeah. And then I was like, that was pretty weird. And he was like, yeah. And then we didn't talk anymore.
Yeah. He's like, and
we just kept looking at the sky.
Yeah. And then he said the next day, they like, there was like everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. And a lot of people saw it. And he was saying, at the time back, what would it have been? Like in the 60s, I guess. Like early 60s. He's like, there was nothing that was capable of that kind of movement at that time, so to speak. I mean, like, not
even today.
Obviously, like, I'm sure the government and like they work on stuff all the time that they're not going to expose until it's perfect. And maybe you never know. There's always a chance. But at the same time, back then, it was like, if they don't have anything like that now, they most likely didn't have anything close to that back then. So it was just very, very weird, like even more weird, I guess. So it was interesting. It was an interesting story.
As a lifelong skeptic, I think the one thing that kind of puts a wrinkle in my theory about what I was saying before, where I doubt that they are here, because then why not just show themselves if they're advanced enough, or if they're not, like, why they couldn't even hide from us possibly. But one thing that I think is, like, you see that video a while back about the Tic Tac that I think it's come up a lot in this recent discussion, but the Air Force pilots that scanned and saw like literally like a little Tic Tac shaped object flying in the air, and it was moving like nothing could move today, and also like they scanned it with thermals and everything, and it seemed to have no exhaust ports or anything like a normal, like any kind of aircraft we would know about today, and then just like took off and they couldn't chase it because it was so fast.
Yes.
And that was like the U.S. Air Force with like all of their equipment like backing up the sighting and everything, and I was like, dang, okay. I was like, okay, that's pretty crazy.
That is pretty telling.
Obviously, I mean, you could say like maybe that's a state actor, like somebody on Earth that came up with a very advanced piece of technology or something. But the fact that the Air Force is like, that's not even like within 10 years of what we're capable of, and that's us who pour like more money into defense than any other country. So
right, yeah, that is true.
That's really something.
Yeah. So with me, I'm also like a big skeptic of things, and I think with anything supernatural and things that you can't see, and that people say exist, or like things that they develop in their minds, I tend to gravitate towards the more logical and the scientific and more,
Occam's razor.
The brain is like incredibly complex that we don't even understand why it does half the things it does, or thinks half the things it thinks. So, like I am very much on that side, but at the same time, I also have to think from a scientific perspective of that, well, we haven't necessarily proved its non-existence, so there's always room for the possibility. So I think that's where I land with stuff like that, where I'm not discarding it and saying it's not possible at all, but most I have to like assume that unless there is actual proof, that more than likely it's not true. But if
there are also other explanations, like say the government's lying, like they
you never know.
Could do, like our government.
But why would they incite like panic or curiosity about the alien world if they didn't want to?
It seems kind of like weird and random at this time. Like it doesn't seem like something that they stand to gain from, but I don't know. I mean, who knows? Maybe they're trying to draw attention away from something, but it's a possible explanation. I haven't got my tinfoil hat on or anything.
The craziest thing is like, because our universe, or not just our universe, but the galaxy in general is like so vast. There's so much we don't know about it. I think within ours that there could potentially be quote unquote alien life in the terms of some kind of organic being, like creation that is like a plant or some kind of small something developing. I think maybe one day we'll find something similar to that. But as far as actual beings that are capable of flight and civilizations and stuff like that within our own personal universe and galaxy, I feel like that's way less likely. But outside of that, anything is possible, like I feel like,
I mean, we happened.
So. Exactly. Yeah. You have to imagine that if we're possible, then it's very possible.
What isn't?
Yeah. I'm in agreement with that for sure.
Yeah.
It's exciting though to think about. I like the science fiction or the science
possible nonfiction.
Yeah, like the difference between, what is it? There's like two genres, like science fiction and science. It's like, is it science fantasy? No, I don't know.
Yeah, it's science fiction. There's also like science fantasy, which kind of blends fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, so I guess science fiction. Your
Shannara Chronicles.
Is science fiction closer to reality, like a potential reality, versus science fantasy, where it's like that's completely unrealistic? Is that the difference?
I mean, I guess. I mean, science. I mean, you can always like, it's a spectrum, right? Like you could always fall anywhere on it, but science fiction tends to stray towards the real. Like this is theoretically something that could be possible, like with an advancement in technology, right?
Okay.
But obviously, some of it's total fantasy because like people will imagine things like being able to travel across the universe with a black hole, and then that might not end up being possible. So
true. Apparently, there's a Venn
possibly possible
a Venn diagram of sci-fi versus fantasy.
Right. Yeah. There's like and then there's also the ones that kind of just mesh them, like
right, and
Star
then there's
Wars
something in the
whatever.
middle.
Where it's like there's the Force, it's magic, but then there's also technology and spaceships and stuff like that.
True. Right. So this says that sci-fi is based on science, and it imagines possible futures. It imagines advancements in technology and is inspired by the possibility of alien encounters, living in outer space, and time travel. I love time travel series. Like anything to do with time travel, I will most likely enjoy. There are some really like trash out there, but I mean, I will at least watch it and entertain their ideas. Anyway, so moving on to
what's your favorite version of time travel before you move on to fantasy?
Okay, my favorite version. What do you mean?
There's your primers versus your Back to the Future versus your Avengers Endgame or Infinity War versus, there's a bunch of different versions of time travel, right?
Right, I guess so. So I do prefer some that are like more, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know that I have a favorite, but I do know that
I almost forgot Groundhog Day.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I don't think I like Groundhog. Like, I'm just saying if I were to experience time travel, I don't think I would prefer to be in a Groundhog Day movie. I would say like I just like the idea of being able to transport to a different time and experience that time for a short amount of time, if possible, and that knowing that there's always a way out. I get really freaked out when you're not sure how to get out of it. So like that Groundhog thing, obviously, but also, I don't know. I do like the primers, like theories and like the psychological thriller aspects of time travel, and where you get sent somewhere and then you have like no idea what's going on. You have to figure out how to get back, or like if you can get back, maybe you can't get back. Maybe you're stuck there. Now you have to start a whole new life. There's like some mystery that you have to solve in order to get out of there.
Back to the Future.
Yes. Back to the Future is just like, one of the best movies
Chef's
of all time.
kiss.
So yeah. But it's also very commercialized and blockbustery. So I do also enjoy like more niche. I'm not gonna just like get on the bandwagon of something because of that. I'm open to all possibilities, to be honest. I just really love the concept. Like, I've been watching Outlander, which is a very long series.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm watching it right now just because there's a new series out, or a new season. So that's what's on my brain right now. But
hey, Andrew from the future here. This is a spoiler warning for Outlander, the TV show about time travel in Scotland, for about the next minute.
That's one where like she got thrown she got thrown back in time, and now she was stuck there. And I don't know like if I'm enjoying. So now it's moved on in the concept of what's going on. And now they're able to travel back to the future. But they have to have, there's certain rules you have to follow, obviously. So it's not easy to do.
Of course.
But they figured out a way to do it.
They can't make it easy.
And they've...
A spoiler alert for Outlander, if you haven't seen it.
It is never easy. Time travel in general, never easy. But anyway, so
I found an article that it's, there are 8 types of time travel. You want to hear them?
Yeah, go for it.
It's anything goes. Characters can travel back and forth within their historical timeline however they want.
See, I feel like that's boring.
Oh, yeah.
A little bit.
It's too easy. It's
too
like,
easy, yeah.
what about all the paradoxes and stuff?
Right. Okay, go ahead.
Then there's branching reality, which is changes to the past don't rewrite history. They split the timeline into an alternate branch, and the actions do not change or erase the original timeline.
Okay.
That's kind of like Loki, I guess. Is that right?
Yeah,
then there's time dilation. So this is, I think, is like probably the most realistic. Characters traveling off-world experience time moving more slowly elsewhere in the universe, allowing them to move forward in time but not backwards. So kind of like, how it would probably actually work, like relativistic time.
Oh, okay. So you would move forward and you wouldn't be able to go back because that's already happened, but you can potentially...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
All of time is fixed on this is the always happened one. All of time is fixed on a predestined loop in which the very act of time travel itself sets the events of the story into motion. So it's like no matter what you do, it's like, that was you always went to like travel through time and did that. And that's why things are the way they are. And so it's like destiny kind of
right. Thing. Yeah.
Then they're seeing the future. So this is characters can see a vision of their fate and change their destiny. Mm-hmm. Time loop, aka Groundhog's Day, where characters relive the same day over and over, resetting back to a respawn point or something. Unstuck mind, where characters consciousness are able to transport through time within their body to his life at different ages. So it's like you can go to a point in your life rather than like actually physically travel, which I guess is the unstuck body, which is a character's body or object becomes physically detached from the flow of time within the surrounding universe, becoming inverted or younger. Only certain objects or bodies are unstuck from time, also called inverted entropy. I'm not sure what that means, actually.
Yeah.
Inverted entropy. Is this like Benjamin Button? Is that what they're saying?
Oh, maybe.
Let's see. There's obviously a bunch of description. Like, there's a whole article, but I'm not going to get that far into it.
Okay, let's see if there's like a movie.
By the way, this is kind of like a tangent from the podcast. Are we doing the 20-minute thing, or are we doing full hours?
Oh, okay, let's see 30 minutes.
All right, well, in that case, we're coming up upon it. So.
Okay, well,
with that in mind, go ahead.
With that in mind, I'm going to jump into what fantasy is.
Versus
sci-fi.
Versus sci-fi.
So sci-fi is,
okay, go ahead.
I told you, based in science, blah, blah, blah. Fantasy is more rooted in the supernatural. It explores the realms of the impossible, often takes place in the past, and is inspired by mythology, folklore, and fairy tales. So the middle ground where they kind of like overlap is that they're not like our world. So it has to be something different than what we are currently experiencing. Also dystopias, good versus evil, and fantastical creatures. So I don't see how fantastical creatures could be a middle ground, but maybe if like in the future there's some creature that was evolved that now they're like weird. I guess that's possible, but
yeah. So I mean, one of the characteristics of sci-fi is that it like imagines a possible future, right? So one of the things that made me like instantly think like blending sci-fi and fantasy was like Star Wars, right? So you set a fantasy, but it's in the future. Actually, Star Wars is technically in the past, but it's a more advanced civilization, so in a way, it's in the future. Mm-hmm. True. But it revolves around like a magical force, so then that's kind of like a blending of the two inherently because it's in the future. But I just had a thought, like, what about like steampunk and like Fallout kind of stuff, where it's like it's almost fantastical in a sense because it like imagines a different path of
reality.
Of like technology and almost to a way of being like it's sort of impossible,
right?
Like I feel like a lot of the steampunk stuff is like I guess Fallout's a little more grounded, but some of the steampunk stuff is like really out there, like
right? Or like Black Mirror too. I think would fall in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, I guess that's more. It's a little more like sci-fi than fantasy, but it gets close.
That's true. Imagines advanced technology. You're right.
Yeah, but it can be in the past, right? Like some of them, steampunk stories and stuff like take place in the past.
True. So. Yeah, you're right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so we're on the same page about aliens, science fiction, when time travel. But specifically, have you finished the book Dune yet?
Oh yeah, that was a long time ago.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm just making sure because it was such a big book.
If it is a big book, I wouldn't put it past myself to have still not finished it, but I did.
Well, congratulations. That's a big
like achievement. A year ago, yeah. I finished it before I watched the movie, so that was a bit, yeah.
Okay, well, to round out
even though apparently I only had to read half of it. I didn't even know they were going to split up into two before I watched the movie. So.
So then you were just like, oh, now I have to wait.
I was like, it's only halfway over. Yeah. What happened?
Love that.
There's a Dune MMO coming out.
No way.
Which I feel like is like, that's kind of wild.
Wow, you're like fully in now. You're like part of the
culture.
Part of the culture.
It's a cool book. I'm still just like allergic to the idea of the desert. It's like such an inhospitable wasteland to me. I've never like really been attracted to stories that revolve around
desert. Yeah, me neither.
Kind of things. So it feels like, on one hand, it's like a really cool sci-fi that's pulling me in, but on the other hand, it's like,
ew. Yeah, it's like, ew. I cannot.
It's like actually uncomfortable to read it, which I guess makes it is the intention, right? It's meant to make you feel like this is awful. But
yeah.
Then like Mod Dib kind of finds his whole groove, and he realizes the desert is actually like a living, breathing thing.
Yeah,
and that's worth saving or whatever.
Hold on, is the movie Riddick? Is that part of Dune?
Riddick?
Or Riddick?
Oh no, that's part of that's they have the Chronicles of Riddick that is about that, and like the you're probably thinking of Pitch Black is the first one.
Oh yeah, that is what I'm thinking of. It just reminded me. It just seemed so similar. I was like, wait a minute.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, it was.
No, not in the same universe.
Okay. All right.
It has a whole universe too, but
okay.
Yeah, different universe.
Huh.
So
interesting. All right.
Thus concludes.
Yes, thus concludes. And just so we're clear, Chicago, I went to the beach, West Palm Beach, and we all both together went to the mountains, Smoky Mountains, Tennessee, and that was our summer. Summer of fun. Next week we'll talk about some other things. So check in.
Something else.
All right. I'll see you then.
We'll come up with something.
We'll talk to you then. We'll chat to you then. Okay. Bye.
And when we're in the distance, you'll hear this whispered tune. So long, very well, big cheerio. We'll be back soon.
I love you.
Oh, okay.
I love you, audience.
Yeah, you're all right. Maybe we'll meet someday, and then I will love you too. But for now, I just like you a lot. Okay, bye.
Bye.